So in this class, this is a framework for a rectangle. We have the attributes, which I always put as first. We have the attributes of the rectangle width and the rectangle height and area. Now these are all double, which is in the software syllabus called reals or floating points, and they're private. And what that means, which it associates with the concept of encapsulation, these attributes cannot be accessed directly from this rectangle class. You can only access these attributes through a method. What we then have is a whole lot of methods, including rectangle, set rectangle, set width, set height. And you can see here some of these I've actually just hiding what's inside them so it makes it easier to see. Now the first one we have is the rectangle class. Now this is an interesting one because it's a constructor class. And what a constructor class means is when the rectangle method is instantiated to create an object, this is the method that's run. So if we pass a width and a height to it, this method would run and it would then pass that data to another method called setRectangle. So we go and look at setRectangle. Here we go, here's setRectangle. What it does is it gets the width and passes it to a value called setWidth. So we look at then setWidth, and here we go. Here's the code for setWidth. So this if then else statement basically checks to see whether the width is actually greater than 0. If it is greater than 0, it actually sets it to that attribute that what's been passed. So this is a local attribute of width. If it's not greater than 0, e.g. it's -5, width would be set to 0. Now what this means is a really important concept, is the fact that the width of this rectangle class can never be a negative number. It's always going to be 0 or more. We know that because the only way to change its width is through this particular method called setWidth. What we also have is a method called getArea, and what this one does is when we call it, it will actually return the area of the rectangle. So it checks to see that the local variables, attributes, height and width are greater than 0. It calculates the area, which is width times height. Now if they're not both greater than 0, it sets the area to be 0. And then it returns that value. Now because it's returning a value, that this getArea is a double. It means that the value returning is a number. Whereas the ones up here, which is the set width ones, these are voids because it's not actually returning a value, it's just modifying it. So that's an overview of some of the major concepts in there. One last concept is the rectangle class. There's two of them, and there's special reasons for that. We have a constructor method called rectangle, and there's two of them. If we pass both the width and height to this rectangle when we set up initially, it'll actually set those values. If nothing is passed, it'll actually run this one. So this is an example of polymorphism. The same method called rectangle can have two different ways of implementing it. So depending on the number of variables being passed, it will run either of these. Both these rectangle constructor classes set the initial values of the attributes, but depending on the data passed, a different one will run. We're now going to look at how this rectangle class is actually used. This code here that we've looked at doesn't actually run until you actually make an instance of it. So this is just a class. What we're going to do is we're going to use it in another class. What I did was I created a tester class called rectangle to try out the rectangle class to see whether it works. Now in Java, the only time your code actually runs is where you have a main. So in this tester class, I've actually created a main, and this is where I'm actually going to use the rectangle class, where I'm going to create an instance of it. What we can see is if we jump down to the main class where this would run first, we actually have a rectangle rec of new rectangle tester class. So here's our rectangle tester class, and in the constructor we set two local variables, width and length. We want to find the width of a rectangle, what we're going to do is we're going to use J option pane. Now we've imported up the top the Java classes, and what that enables us to do is to use some other classes such as double and J option pane. And now what these do enable us to use existing code in Java. So we're using existing Java objects to make it easier for us to code. So the width is J option pane showed input dialog box is a method which brings up a dialog box where we can enter in the rectangle width. What that then does is puts it through the method called parse double, which makes sure that the value entered is actually a double and not a string. And that's input in the width. Length is done the same. So what we have after this is we have local variables width and length holding values. Here's where we use the rectangle class. So we're going to create a new rectangle class, calling it rec. Now what we're doing here is we're going to pass the values width and length back to the new rectangle class, and that's how we're going to instantiate the rectangle class. Once we have done that, what we can then do is, in this case, we can actually look at the rectangle and we're going to work out the area of it. We have the rec object, which is the instance of the rectangle class, and we can say get area, and that's going to display the area of the rectangle. So this is how we're using the rectangle class, and this is the instance, the object that we're going to use. So now I'm going to run this program and we'll see what it does. So what it does here is it brings up a dialog box, which is this line, to work out the width, and we enter that in, say as 20, press OK. Then it's bringing up the length, which is this next line, and we enter that as 10, so we've got 10 and 20, so the area should be 200. So we press OK. What it should now do is do the line, which is the J option pane show it, so the area that rectangle is, and it should say 20, and that's our program. So that's how it works. Thank you.